So Michael's found out about the Brain Sharpeners plan and what they were going to do, came back to Earth, and is already worried about the changes in his browser. Chapter 7. As soon as Michael walked into the school playground the next morning, he realised how much the Brain Sharpeners had changed his friends in Class 8 in one day. Some of them, including Spiky Jackson, Anna Cardwell and Jason Little, were already there, but not playing around the playground as they used to do. Instead, they were hanging around the entrance door, anxious to be first inside. "What's the rush, Spiky? Have they given away toffee apples this morning?" asked Michael. "No, they're not," replied Spiky, as though Michael had asked a serious question. Anna and some of the others frowned at Michael, and he saw they were all carrying notebooks. "What's been going on yesterday? What are the notebooks about?" For a while no one condescended to answer him. "Haven't you done any homework?" Anna asked eventually. "Homework? Not likely. Time for enough of that at secondary school." "I did 4 hours last night," said Spiky Jackson, looking highly satisfied about it. 4 hours? You? Spiky? Impossible. You haven't gone round the bend, have you?" Spiky flipped over the pages of his exercise book, pages filled with neat writing of which Michael would never believe Spiky capable. "You'll have to work hard to catch up with us, Mike," said Spiky. "Shan't have much time to catch up today. What with a television programme this morning and games this afternoon," observed Michael. "Aren't we playing a class football match with Class 7 this afternoon?" "There won't be any games lessons this afternoon," put in Anna. "We've agreed to cancel our games lessons from now on. Mr. Browser says we need all the time available in order to achieve what he set out to do this term." "You're joking," said Michael weakly, but there wasn't a sign of mischief in Anna's expression. "TV's been cut out too," Spiky informed him. "Waste of time, so Mr. Browser says. Wants us to concentrate on maths and science this term. If we do enough homework, he thinks we'll be up to O-level standard by Easter." Other Class 8 children were now crowding around the door, all as earnest as Spike and Anna. Michael's heart sank. Mr. Browser, he knew, would never have cancelled games on a fine day, or cut out the weekly television programme. "You're being tricked," he shouted to them all. "You and Mr. Browser are being used by the Brain Sharpeners. If they think you can make you smart enough, they'll take you to Planet 5 and you'll never come back. You'll be kidnapped." The other members of Class 8 stared at Michael as though he himself was something from outer space, then turned away from him. A bell sounded inside the school, and a few seconds later the door was opened by Miss Toms. "Class 8, you all seem keen to go into school today," she remarked. She was used to having round up Spiky Jackson, and sometimes Michael, from the far end of the playground. "We've got some work to give in to Mr. Browser," explained Spiky. "Indeed," said Miss Toms, giving him an odd look. "Well, if that's so, I'd better let the fourth years in first. Here, careful, don't knock me over." Michael followed in the wake of keen Class 8 students who were up the corridor and stairs and into the classroom in a flash. "Good morning, Class 8, said Mr. Browser. They were all sitting at their desks, waiting for him as he went and sat down at his desk like an automaton. "I trust you've all completed the suggested homework." The class, with the exception of Michael, answered together with enthusiasm. "Then I trust we can look forward to another day of concentrated learning," went on Mr. Browser. "I'll call the register first." When it came to Michael's name, he stopped uneasily. "Michael," he asked, "have you done any homework?" "No, Mr. Browser. I was away yesterday." "I remember," said Mr. Browser, frowning. "You'll have to work extra hard today in order to catch up with the rest of the class, and perhaps do an hour or two of extra homework tonight." "Yes, Mr. Browser. An hour or two of extra homework." Mr. Browser had been turned into a slave driver. Michael decided he would try and play along with him and the rest of the class. It was sad to see Mr. Browser, so much changed by the Brain Sharpeners. It would be no use trying to persuade him and his class that they were in grave danger. Another way of fighting the Brain Sharpeners must be found. Several days passed in concentrated study at school, followed by hours of homework each night. When the weekend came, all of Class 8, with the exception of Michael, looked sad at the prospect of the break in the learning routine. Mr. Browser, too, was worried about this and tried to make up for it by giving out enough homework to keep the class busy all Saturday and Sunday. The headmaster was taking an increasing interest in the class, and his opinion of Mr. Browser was rising steadily. At first he had been suspicious and disbelieving, but once he saw the great strides in progress which Mr. Browser had made, he was only too keen to bask in some of the glory. Michael was the only fly in the educational ointment. He was completely out of his depth in all subjects, and obviously was not doing a tenth of the amount of homework done by the others. "Michael," the headmaster warned him, "if you can't keep up with the rest, you'll have to be transferred to another class. You're the only one who's not taking advantage of the excellent teaching Mr. Browser's providing." "I'm the only one who's not being brainwashed," retorted Michael. "Sit down and don't be so impolite," the headmaster ordered him. On Monday morning he resolved to make one last attempt to foil the Brain Sharpeners. Only the headmaster could save the class, he reasoned, by having Mr. Browser removed from the school. If the class had no more direct contact with the Brain Sharpeners, their machines, then perhaps the effect would wear off, and Michael would win back his friends. He knocked on Mr. Salt's door as soon as he entered school that morning. The headmaster frowned when he saw Michael. "Well, Michael," he greeted him, "I trust you're taking more of an effort to please Mr. Browser." "I've come to see you about Mr. Browser in Class 8, said Michael. "It's very important. If something isn't done soon, it'll be too late to save them." "Save them? From what?" "From the Brain Sharpeners. Mr. Browser's in touch with them, sir. They come from another galaxy, and they're trying to sharpen up the brains of Class 8 in order to send them to a planet they want to populate. Unless we can show their brains aren't developed as much as the brain sharpeners require, one day they'll vanish, Mr. Salt, and they'll never come back. They'll be kidnapped by the brain sharpeners, Mr. Salt. I'm warning you." Michael paused for breath, and Mr. Salt sat back in his chair and stared at him. He didn't take kindly to anyone in his school warning him about anything. "That's quite a speech, Michael," he said. "It's all true, sir." "Do you really expect me to believe it? I happen to be highly pleased with your class and with Mr. Browser. You're the only one that gives me cause for concern, Michael. Even if your story was true, I would do all I could to assist Mr. Browser to keep in contact with any power that could turn Class 8 into such an excellent group of children." I can just imagine the surprise of the headmaster of the comprehensive school when he discovers how far in advance the Chevy Chase children coming up to him are. They'll be far beyond the children of any other junior school. I am proud of them, Michael. No, my boy, it is not the rest of the class for which I fear. I fear for you. I would advise you to return to your class and buckle down to work, my lad. That's all." "You're worse than the brain sharpeners," burst out Michael. The headmaster was already shuffling papers, and Michael knew that he was once again beaten. The brain sharpeners were winning. As he left Mr. Salt's room, he had to admit he should not have expected any different reaction from a man as proud of his school as Mr. Salt. All hope seemed lost until he passed the door of Mr. Coatwell's offices. He heard voices from within. "I'd like to have a word with Mr. Salt," the man was saying earnestly. "I don't know what's the matter with my Simon lately. He's behaving in a most curious manner." "I'm sorry to hear it," said Miss Coatwell in her sympathetic voice. "What's the trouble, Mr. Jackson?" "He's spending all his time working," said Mr. Jackson. "We can't stop him. No time for anything at all. He's fishy. He's not in trouble any more, it's true, but his behaviour's not normal." "They do go through funny stages," Miss Coatwell informed him. "However, if Mr. Salt is free, no doubt he'll be pleased to see you." Michael stood just beyond the office door and listened, and a ray of hope warmed to him. This was Spiky Jackson's father, come to school because he can't understand why Spiky's suddenly become a bookworm. Maybe other parents would be equally suspicious. As Michael walked back to class, Mr. Salt kindly agreed to see Mr. Jackson, but before he did, he gave Miss Cokewell something to do. Please check in the file if there's anything odd about Michael Farley and his family, he requested her. Have you noticed anything yourself lately? I can't say I have, Mr. Salt. The boy's been in here telling the most ridiculous story, behaved like a lunatic. Maybe he's been seeing too many of those space adventure films, but I'd like you to check. And now please send in Miss Jackson. So pleasing some parents. Why, his son has just begun to work hard for the first time. I shan't let Mr. Jackson waste much of my time, I can assure you. Well, that didn't go very well for Michael, did it? Hopefully he'll have better luck with his next plan.